What can you tell me about 1871?
1871 is an innovation space that we put together, state, city, private sector. And what happens today in startup companies, like other industries, is you need not only density, you need that sense of community. It's a shared space. It's had about 500 companies run through it. It's expanding. We added now our third edition of new space because of what's happening. And my best example of the kind of ecosystem from a public sector we can do, I probably should have added this one other thing. We are, from the public side, putting out a tremendous amount of reams of data. So allowing apps and other companies to use that data information. Anyway, this young man holds up a lithium battery. And I said, what's that? He said, well, it's a new battery I've developed, battery storage capacity. I said, well, where'd you get that? He said, at the Argonne Lab, part of that grant that you received from the Department of Energy. I said, great. I said, well, where are you? He says, over at 1871. So I mean, it kind of put together the whole thing that we were trying to do. Basic research, a space where he can get out of his kitchen table, not yet ready for a storefront or an office, and yet have that shared space where he can work with other like-minded people on taking a concept to business and to market and find the funding right next door down the hall at a coffee. Just grab a cup of coffee and sit down with a VC and start to get to his next round of funding beyond the family size. So that's kind of what we're doing. In 1871 is the kind of flagship. We've set up relationships now with other innovation spaces in London and in Tel Aviv. And so we have, as I said, we have our own foreign policy. But when I became mayor, the city of Chicago on innovation spaces, 0. We're now at 11. The 11th being the recent one we just announced on life sciences. And what is also interesting, this is unique about Chicago, you have these young companies which really kind of, they call it creative destruction, but take on established industries and are more nimble and look at niches and try to figure out technology to solve problems. Unlike New York, where, God forbid, something happens to the financial sector, New York kind of takes the country and drives off the side of the road. That's also true about LA on the entertainment side. In Chicago, no one sector of our economy is bigger than 13% of our employment. So whether it's healthcare, retail, tourism, professional services, risk management, insurance, no sector drives more than 13% of the employment. One, that's a tremendous depth of employment and workforce capacity. Second, like what we just did with the life sciences, because of our research institution, Abbott, Baxter, all the other medical capacities, we have the 5 of the 15 top teaching hospitals in America right here. It makes sense now to get that institutional support to create an innovation space, which is what we did in the life sciences, something that a city or a state can't drive, but harnesses big institutional players who want to also be on the cutting edge of the next generation of technology.
San Francisco has been debating, arguing, dealing with this issue of gentrification brought about by the tech sector. Mm-hmm. And there's a side of the city that says, wait a second, hold on, we're kind of losing a little bit of maybe the character of this city, and that has to do with housing and a lot of other issues. How do you continue to try to attract the jobs and the companies and the people that they're going to employ while also, managing the diversity and the character of Chicago and not losing that?
Yeah, I think it's a challenge. There's a couple examples. Now, one of the interesting things, as I just told you, Chicago's housing, or Chicago's cost of living is a third of San Francisco.
Right.
And our housing stock, single-family housing stock, is much deeper than San Francisco. Tremendous difference. Second is our public transportation. Third, very important, is we have a tremendous park system. I've added 1,000 acres to our, just shy of 1,000 acres to our parks, and we're rebuilding every playground in the city of Chicago. And our library system was just rated #1 in America for neighborhood library systems, part of what we're doing on technology. San Francisco has a different topography, obviously with the ocean and limited space. And it's a work in progress. Do I say we have it perfect? You've got to kind of constantly be nimble about how to approach this. But I think we have balanced both the growth that's happening in the triangle of Fulton Market, what's happening at Merchandise Market, where 1871 is that you just talked about on this side of the river, and then up the river where Groupon is. That triangle has now produced it's grown by a third from 30,000 to 40,000 jobs, and I think in the next 3 years we can get to 80,000 jobs in the tech space. And I would say in the next decade, while I speak for Chicago, obviously I would never say that Silicon Valley or Route 128 has run its course. I think the next decade in the new economy is for places like Austin, Chicago, and New York that you're going to see the next innovations, the companies.